Welcome to the Commentary Magazine Daily Podcast. Today is Thursday, June 6th, 2024. I'm John Budhortz, the editor of Commentary Magazine, reminding you again that on November 17th here in New York City, we will have our 14th annual Commentary Roast. The roastee, following in the footsteps of Norman Podhoretz, Dick Cheney, Joe Lieberman, Jonah Goldberg, Charles Krauthammer, Mayor Soloveichik. I don't want to offend anybody by forgetting their names. Ben Shapiro,
Dan Senor,
Barry Weiss.
That one was ready for Netflix.
There we go. That was until the roast of Tom Brady.
Yeah, the roast of Barry Weiss
about as explicit as we are going to get. And Tom Cotton, whose name is going to come up later on this podcast, last year, is Natan Sharansky, the greatest living Jewish hero, thus raising the question, how do you roast a hero? Well, you're going to find out if you come to our roast on November 17th here in New York City. Go to commentary.org/roast for details. It is not a cheap ticket. It is not a cheap table. It is our one major fundraising event every year. We are a nonprofit 501c3. We depend upon this event and your eleemosynary generosity to keep the candles burning. So, commentary.org/roast. And if you're there, you will meet my colleagues today, executive editor Abe Greenwald. Hi, Abe.
Hi, John.
And Washington commentary columnist Matthew Continetti. Hi, Matt.
Hi, John.
There's a lot of grim things that we could be talking about this morning. I want to start with simply raw, naked pundit politics, just to have a little, palate clearing and get the nightmares I had last night about what's going on between Israel and Hezbollah out of my head. So, Matt Continetti, stories everywhere. Involving A, the polling after the Trump conviction, and
That's
B,
right.
Trump's potential choices for vice president. So you want to go to the polling or you want to go to Veep?
Well, I think the polling is pretty simple to explain, so maybe we should just tackle that first. The New York Times, in its poll it does with Siena College, reached nearly 2,000 people who had participated in previous Times Siena polls to see if any of them had changed their minds since a week ago when Donald Trump was convicted of 34 counts of falsifying business records in furtherance of the mystery crime. What did they find? Trump is still ahead.
By 1 point instead of two. Instead of two.
And, I really like Nate Cohn, the New York Times psephologist or elections specialist. He's also
Psephologist is the term like phrenologist that describes a false science. In this case, being somebody who reads and analyzes polls. PSEPHOLOGIST.
Yeah,
and it's hilarious because it sort of popped out of nowhere. I'm a psephologist.
Yes, and he, of course, is the inventor of the dial. Is that what they call it?
The needle.
Sorry, the needle. He invented the needle, which performed amazingly well in 2016 when it went from a 95% chance of Hillary victory to 100% Trump within a course of several hours. So he looked at this poll that I just described. He helped conduct it, and his write-up of it, I have to say, maybe it's just the Times headline writers, but the headline in the Times is "Small Shift Toward Biden After Trump Verdict." Yeah, I know. That's pretty small. It's 1 point, and Trump is still ahead. So I don't think much has changed, and I think it reinforces the idea that I was always kind of persuaded by, that the New York verdict would not change that much in this race.
According to Nate Cohn's analysis, the only, I would say, interesting detail in Nate Cohn's analysis is the dragging over broken glass to get to the polls effect, which is to say that he finds a genuine, I am going to drag myself over broken glass to the polls to vote for Trump among Trump voters, people who've already said that they were voting for Trump, but may not have been, may like have been that, well, it's rainy today, so I'm going to stay home. The enthusiasm effect appears very much, according to this poll, to be in Trump's favor. That is to say that 17% of people who said they were going to vote for Trump now say, man, are they going to vote for Trump? They are going to vote for Trump so hard, nobody will ever have voted for anybody the way they are going to vote for Trump. And there is no comparable number among voters who have seen the verdict come in and who are going to vote for Biden. The verdict, by the way, is approved, according to the people who have answered this poll, meaning the 2,000 Siena people polled, 46-33. So what that tells you is, yeah, everybody who says they're going to vote for Biden approves of the verdict of the poll. Then you have a bunch of people who don't approve of the verdict of the poll, 33%. And you have people in the middle who are saying, I didn't pay any attention. That's the election. Right there. Those people who haven't heard enough are tending to vote for Trump. That, I mean, I don't know how else you read this.
And when
the approval number on the verdict is exactly the same number of people in percentage terms who say they're going to vote for Biden.
Right. The aspect here that's worth noting is the enthusiasm gap. And you've already pointed it out in this, it's apparent in this poll where the verdict has really spurred Trump fans to want to vote for him in November. But this is something we've been looking at in many polls. When you ask Republicans or Democrats, are they excited about voting? And the difference in one study of a recent Monmouth poll from April that my colleague at AEI, Nate Moore, did for the Liberal Patriot, showed that 63% of Republicans were very or somewhat enthusiastic about voting in November. Only 36% of Democrats were very or somewhat enthusiastic, almost 2-to-1 advantage for Republicans. And that has dogged Biden throughout this election. And you really have to wonder, is there anything that's going to make Democrats excited about voting for Joe? And I don't see it.
I just love the manufactured enthusiasm. That's the only kind of enthusiasm there is for Biden. Right. Is like, the Twitter blast from
everything.
People.
Yeah, and everything's behind closed doors.
Right.
With Biden, right? I mean, behind closed doors, Biden is a genius. He's on top of everything. He's the Phil Hartman in the Reagan sketch where he's pulling out all the blueprints for the attack on Iran and telling how to meet with the Sultan of Brunei. And behind closed doors, everyone in the Democratic Party is excited about Biden. It's just you never see it publicly. Right. They don't want. I guess they don't want to give.
Well, that's what Senator Jim Risch said. It's like, I want to see that guy. Where's that guy?
Yeah.
That's a Republican senator who said, I'd be happy to see that guy. I've been in private meetings with him, and that's not the guy. So maybe he's in a deeper room in the White House where they've got it lined with lead so that no one, and there's a cone of silence, and there he's a freaking genius, right?
Yeah, or he's like Putin with body doubles.
Yeah,
the Joe Biden that we see doddering around the South Lawn, that's actually a fake. The real Joe Biden is there on top of everything.
Well, I had maybe a fresh observation out of nowhere came to me, which is the Trump verdict was, I think Democrats thought, possibly going to have an epical effect, or they certainly thought this last year, that one way or another, a conviction of Trump in a criminal trial, and based on a little bit of polling, was going to be a kind of hinge moment where they would no longer have to opine that he was a criminal, that he would then have been declared a criminal by the system that we use for such things. And that what they were hoping for, in some sense, was the epical effect on the United States of Gerald Ford's pardon of Richard Nixon, which if you were not alive or you were too young to know how big a thing that was, even though it was obviously the right thing to do. It was a gigantic moment in American political history. The public had been sort of veering toward Ford liking him. He had a long, huge honeymoon. People were very happy with him and felt like he had restored normalcy and all of that. And then just the world came down around his shoulders, and his presidency was never quite the same. He also couldn't have had a presidency quite the same because the 1974 midterm elections were so lopsided in favor of the Democrats that he had to struggle to do just about anything. And when the race began in 1976, there was a point at which he was 30 points behind Jimmy Carter in the polls. And then Carter won by a point, which is to say, both the enthusiasm problem relating to Biden and the notion that individual events change elections are both highly overstated. That is to say, can Democrats manufacture enough enthusiasm for Biden in September and October to get unenthusiastic voters to the polls in November? There is evidence that they have been able to do that in the past, particularly in 2012, when there was remarkably, people don't even remember this, but extraordinarily little enthusiasm for Obama. And the Ford precedent suggests that anybody can overcome anything. And that the normal, because Ford was the weakest candidate ever for president. He hadn't even been elected vice president. Nobody knew who he was. He was a congressman from Grand Rapids, Michigan, who had been the minority leader in the House, a position with no power after 20 years of Democratic dominance, and a person of very little charisma, I would say. So if you're looking to the past as evidence for the future, you could say it's very easy to overstate the lack of enthusiasm problem for Biden. And it's easy to overstate the idea that a verdict, even another verdict, which I don't think is going to happen, since we just heard that the Georgia case against Trump has now been kind of delayed permanently until a judge rules on the question of whether or not Fani Willis, the prosecutor, should be removed from that case because of her improper conduct with her lead prosecutor. So that case is now off the table. Clearly, the J6 and the classified documents cases appear to be off the table until November. So this is it. This is what we got. This right. And the two civil cases against him. And sorry,
I think there is conceivably a single event that could change things more dramatically, but this was never going to be it. Because this wasn't really an event that sort of stems from Trump. Nothing new happened. Nothing new was discovered. This was about people making a decision about Trump based on a judge's rules. You know what I mean? There was no disclosure really here about some new behavior, some new transgression that Trump engaged in.
Right.
I want to
important point.
I just want to mention for my upcoming commentary column, I was doing some research into the wrong track, right track numbers. And the fact is, more Americans have said that this country's on the wrong track than not since about 2004. So that's just kind of the background. What that's meant, though, is that we've had this incredible tumult in our elections. Since 2004, we've had 9 biannual elections. 8 of them have involved change in either one chamber of Congress or the House or the presidency or all 3 of those things, right? The only exception, the only status quo election since the wrong track overtook the right track was 2012, which was a status quo election. Nothing changed. And I went back and I looked at where the right track, wrong track numbers were on election day 2012. The differential, the spread, was 13 points on election day 2012. That is, right track was underwater by 13 points. As today, as we talk on D-Day anniversary, June 2024, the spread is minus 41 points. So it's just very hard for me to see how Biden is going to be able to get that differential close to where Obama was able to get it by election day. And that would suggest that we're due for another change election.
That's a very interesting point. I just went back. That was not a change election. And then, boy, was 2016 a change election. I mean, not just Trump, because of course you could always say he didn't win the popular vote, so he drew to an inside straight. He tricked them. He found new voters. All of that, and then of course it didn't hold because in 2020, his gains were reversed. But that was not the all of 2016, right? The all of 2016 was Republicans preserved their majority in the House and Senate and extended it. And then there was the epical destruction of the Democratic Party at the state and local levels. Over the course of the Obama presidency, by the time 2016 was over, Democrats had lost over 1,000 state legislative seats, and they had lost, I believe, 25 governor's mansions. So the change effect was enormous, even when it looked like there was no change. And here we are with every signal saying change, like every large signal. I'll give you an example. At another poll of Georgia, this is Quinnipiac, taken a couple days ago. Trump wins. Trump is ahead 5 points in Georgia. Now, remember, Georgia was arguably the state that in Arizona, the flipping of Georgia and Arizona is what won Trump the presidency, along with Pennsylvania. And those were won by 10 and 12,000 votes, respectively. Trump is now, I think, consistently in polling ahead in Georgia outside the margin of error, around 5 points in every poll. And it's not personality. That's why Biden is in so much trouble. Now, granted, it's Georgia. Remember, Georgia voted for Biden. So you can say whatever you want to say, but here are the issues as laid out by Quinnipiac. Who is better? Biden wins on abortion 47-45. On economy, Trump 58-38. On immigration, Trump 56-39. On Gaza, Trump 53-39. I don't even know what that means. On Russia invasion, Trump 54-41. Again, I don't know what that means, except general disapproval of Biden's handling on foreign
Trump
policy.
Will bring order. That's what that means.
Right.
They think Trump will end these wars.
And preserving democracy, Trump 49-46.
And that's the verdict. That's reaction to the verdict.
That's
and all the trials.
In other words, that Biden should be winning on preserving democracy.
That was his issue in 2020 and 2022. But because of the lawfare, it seems to me that many Republicans and even many independents are now saying, hold it. What do you mean about democracy when you guys are clearly targeting Trump in order to remove him from the field of play before the election? I think that offends many voters.
Let's say it offends enough voters for it to be showing up significantly as in the polls as a way of telling people they're not happy with what happened. Yeah.
So the economy and immigration are the top two issues in this election, and Trump is winning both by double digits is what you just said in this one state.
By 20 points in each case.
Right. And I think
not even double digits, like 20 points in a swing state.
So you have Biden on Tuesday coming out with his executive order where he's trying to put a Band-Aid on the southern border by creating this kind of Rube Goldberg-like mechanism where the border is, air quote, closed after a certain number of unauthorized crossings. And the New York Times wrote it up as saying, Biden starts to play in Trump's sandbox. Can Biden tackle the immigration issue with Trump? And the answer is no. I mean, there's nothing Biden could have done other than, find Doc Brown and go back in time to the first day of his presidency so he could prevent himself from signing the executive orders that undid all of the Trump immigration policies. Besides that, there's nothing Biden could do to restore parity with Trump on the immigration issue. And so you have this sense of a flailing presidency. On the economy, the same thing. I did some research for this column, John. I think you'll like it when I file it later today.
I love to hear about research. I love it.
I went back, and there's only one president that has the same price inflation in the last 50 years. One full-term president that has the same level of price increase as Biden, and that's Jimmy Carter. There's only one president whose approval ratings at this point in the cycle are like Biden's, and that's Jimmy Carter. And there's only one Democratic incumbent in the last 50 years whose right track, wrong track is similar to Biden's, and that's Jimmy Carter.
Oh boy.
Who, by the way, was not reelected.
Yes, not reelected, by the way,
and still alive.
10 points, and still alive to maybe God
to watch Biden lose.
Yeah, it's like the Green Mile.
It is.
It's like the Green Mile. God is keeping him alive to see Trump win again for his sins against the Jewish people. He is being kept alive to watch all of his dreams die. I want to. Listen, I'm going to say this again. I thought Trump should have been impeached and convicted on the January 6th matter. I think Trump is a crook. I think he is not fit to be president, and my views on him have changed very little in terms of the character issue, which is very important to me as a matter of political character since 2015. However, I mean, it is the nature of the assaults on him that rattle me in the way I think they rattle a lot of people. And I just want to quote Adam Liptak, a veteran legal journalist. There was a news analysis that was in the New York Times yesterday. Let me just read you the headline, the subhead, and the first paragraph, because it's the I'm taking crazy pills moment that I experienced yesterday. Trump's vows to prosecute rivals put rule of law on the ballot. Yeah. Trump's rivals from 2020 onward in New York, in Georgia, and at the Justice Department in the person of Jack Smith prosecuted him, thereby putting rule of law on the ballot in 2024 way more than anything Trump could say about wanting to prosecute his rivals in 2025 has, because Biden, the Democrats have already prosecuted their rival. This is the subhead. Donald Trump's promise to seek retribution challenges long-established norms, as opposed to, say, elevating a misdemeanor to a felony in pursuit of a second criminal charge that you don't name. That didn't violate any long-established norm that I'm aware of, but that happened, and Trump didn't do it. The Democratic candidate for district attorney in Manhattan who won an election in 2022, he did it.
Or organizing a group of dozens of national security officials to write a letter saying that a laptop was a Russian disinformation, the same laptop that was entered into evidence by the federal government in its trial against Hunter Biden yesterday as completely authentic.
Right. Second sentence of the subhead. The election could hinge in part on what kind of justice system the country believes it has now and wants in the future. Yes, that's correct. Whose buttons are being pushed by that idea? Republicans and conservatives, not liberals. They got the verdict they wanted. Now they're saying, oh, Trump's going to prosecute his rivals. Okay. First paragraph of the article. Former President Donald J. Trump says he is prepared to prosecute his political enemies if he is elected this fall. Simply making these threats, legal experts said, does real damage to the rule of law, as opposed to pursuing what are effectively bills of attainder against Donald Trump, as has happened now in cases where charges or accusations that date back to the 1990s with no specific date or time are now leading to results like findings of fault in civil matters, and this case against him on the charge of falsifying business records that would never have been brought by anybody else. And this is how the New York Times is writing a piece saying Donald Trump is going to get reelected because Democrats misused their prosecutorial powers to pursue a political rival. Only they flipped it. They flipped the script and say, the problem is that Trump is threatening to do this thing to his rivals that has just been done to him. And I am taking crazy pills, except I'm not, because I'm right, and Liptak and his editor, Joe Kahn, and whoever wrote this headline and subhead in the paper are wrong. They are the right analysis and the wrong target.
I do think that whenever reporters want to write that story about Trump's prospective assault on democracy and the rule of law, they run to two sources: Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro. Navarro's in jail. Bannon may well be in jail pretty soon. And they can count on Bannon and Navarro to say the wildest things about what a second Trump term might involve. When reality is they are two voices on the fringe of MAGA world. And they're at the center of MAGA world, but they're kind of in the fringe of Trump world. Remember, you always have to distinguish between the two of them. And we actually listen to Trump. He makes these threats. There's no doubt about it. But he does it in ways, as always, that give him trapdoors. So even in his exchange with Fox and Friends after the conviction, his one major interview since the conviction, the anchors asked him, he said, well, what are you going to do? You said you were going to lock Hillary up. And Trump gave this answer, I thought that I did say that, but then, of course, I decided that it would hurt the country. And so I didn't do anything. And now, though, that this has happened to me, I might reconsider. And then always with Trump, then he goes, or maybe not. So you don't know what he's going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, so, but
by the way, yeah,
go ahead.
No, but I agree. But speaking of Hillary, if you want to talk about the assault that the Times is raving about on our democracy, this began in 2016 with the initiating the Russiagate investigation. I mean, had Trump done that to a rival, they would be.
We should date
outraged.
that because it's important, right? Because people the details get fuzzy. On July 31st, 2016, the Obama Justice Department launched Operation Hurricane to examine evidence of whether or not Trump was a spy for Russia.
Crossfire Hurricane.
Crossfire Hurricane. That did not happen. That didn't even happen after the conversation after the election was overheard between Michael Flynn and the the Russian ambassador, where Flynn, then going to be the incoming national security advisor, said like go easy on Americans and maybe we'll have a decent relationship.
Right.
Which, by the way, was held to be a terrible, monstrous thing to say. Like, I'm going to be national security advisor. You know, it would be a solid, like, do the right thing. You know, leave the Americans alone or in your custody, and then maybe we'll have a good relationship. I don't like Michael Flynn. I think he's a psychopath. I continue to marvel at the idea that was an act of evil interference in the foreign policy efforts and aims of the United States. Nonetheless, they started the investigation with no evidence during the Obama administration. And that's just a fact. And you're right, Abe. I mean, it is like a kind of mirror image. It is projection. It's like they are accusing Trump and the Trump people who have many sins and are guilty of many things. And the verdicts against Bannon and Navarro are legitimate verdicts. So they are bad, and Trump has done many bad things. But they accuse him of doing the things that they did. That's what is so startling, and why. And I think there is some kind of rough justice, like Gogol's overcoat or something, coming their way because of it. Imagine that they had gone another way and hadn't focused their entire ire on Trump even after 2020 was over, and had made a different case.
We might have had a competitive Republican primary.
Yeah. They made Trump. They saved Trump from DeSantis. And now maybe they didn't. Maybe that didn't really.
Just don't know what would have happened,
yeah.
right? Because, right. But yeah. I agree. It's clear, and DeSantis has said this publicly. DeSantis was competitive with Trump in the beginning of 2023. In March of 2023, Bragg filed the indictment, which led to the convictions last week. And at that moment, support for Trump spiked. And it happened, of course, earlier as well with the search of Mar-a-Lago for the documents, right? And it just continued. And then the timing of the federal charges against Trump is even more bizarre, because the charges for January 6th, awful. But January 6th, 2021, the charges didn't come until after Trump announced his campaign for president in 2022. So what were they waiting for, right? I think
it's that David Frum headline, right? I got to go back to the David Frum headline on the day of the conviction, right?
Right. Wrong case, right verdict. Meaning, there you go.
He needed to be found guilty because he's terrible. And guess what? That is not America. I hate to sound like Biden. That is not America.
It's not who we are.
It's not who we are. You know who we are? We're people who work. Abe, Matt, me. We're people who work. We find our work fulfilling. We find our work revivifying. We find our work helps define our lives and our purpose. And that is the subject of David Bahnsen's remarkable new book, Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life. Our friend, economist and financial manager, argues that whether it be in public policy, in the culture, or even in religious bodies, work lately has come to be characterized as a necessary evil and not the universal blessing it is. He argues for the economic, theological, and ontological significance of work, suggesting that it is the core to our identity and that the fastest way to a failed society will be to continue in this low regard for work, which ignores our God-given capacity for productivity. It is not the kind of book on work that you have ever read. It is not a how-to manual. It is not a rah-rah leadership secrets manual. It is about why work matters and gives your life the same kind of meaning that family and faith and children and community do. Get David Bahnsen's Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life today at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, or wherever fine books are sold. That's Full-Time Work and the Meaning of Life, and you can check out more at fulltimebook.com. So with Trump now, not in the catbird seat, but certainly in a strong position and stronger than any of us might have thought he would be at this moment, it is time to cast forward to two things. One we did yesterday, which is the debate coming now in 19 days. That will be one heck of a moment in American political history, one way or the other. And the other is the substantive choice that he has to make, the one substantive choice of this election cycle, as far as I can tell, which is who his vice presidential nominee will be. And there have been stories everywhere about people who have been asked to supply the packet that will reveal who these people are in the packet. All of them being rather well-known individuals who anyone could just Google the packet, but they're being asked to submit the packet, and there's some interesting stuff going on there, including the missing names, and one might say that the missing names are more interesting for why they're missing. So, Matt, what's your where are you going with that?
Well, the news broke last night. Politico broke the story, and then it was quickly followed up by others that the Trump campaign has asked for personal information from more than a half dozen possible vice presidential picks as the VP search escalates. According to Politico, the requests for personal information, probably including some type of tax returns, included Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, North Dakota Governor Doug Burgum, South Carolina Senator Tim Scott, Florida Representative Byron Donalds, New York Representative Elise Stefanik, Florida Senator Marco Rubio, Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, and former Housing and Urban Development Secretary Ben Carson. So there is your short list, ladies and gentlemen. Not a lot of surprises. Perhaps the biggest surprise are the people who are not on the list, including South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, the dog killer. She's been left apparently on the sidelines, but
she's crying like the kid in Old Yeller. She is crying like the kid in Old Yeller who had to put the dog down.
Yeah. There's no Mike Pompeo. There's no Glenn Youngkin. And there's no Nikki Haley. But you have Vance, Burgum, Scott, Donald, Stefanik, Rubio, and Cotton and Carson. Now, I want to point out one thing, that all of these candidates have different strengths and weaknesses. And there's a structural thing to keep in mind as well, which is if Trump chooses a senator and the Republican ticket wins in November, that means you're going to have a Senate vacancy in a potentially 50-50 Senate, right? At this point, basically, the Republicans are guaranteed to pick up the West Virginia seat, which would elevate the parity. There would be 50-50. And with a Republican presidency, the Republican vice presidents would break the tie. Now, there's the possibility that Republicans will pick up more seats. However, at this point, almost all of the Republican Senate candidates are trailing not only the Democrats, they're actually running behind Trump in places like Montana, Arizona, even Ohio, Pennsylvania is another one. So at the very least, we can anticipate 50-50. So that means if you have a Senate vacancy, then a lot depends on who appoints the replacement and what that replacement's chances might be in a subsequent election to fill the seat through the will of the voters. And so let's go through the list. Senator Tim Scott, okay, if they win South Carolina, pretty red state, shouldn't really jeopardize people's chances. Arkansas Senator Tom Cotton, Arkansas, pretty red state. If Trump Cotton is the winning ticket, then that seat in the Senate is pretty much guaranteed hold. Florida Senator Marco Rubio, it gets a little bit more complicated. There is this residency issue hanging out there. The 11th Amendment says that the president and vice president can't live in the same state. And so if Trump wanted to go with Rubio, he would first have to cross the hurdle of figuring out how to deal with the residency issue, which is complicated and which would involve court cases, you would think. And does Trump really need another court case? Let's say he goes through it and they win. They figure out some way that Rubio either resigns from the Senate and moves his residency to Virginia, or decides to move his residency to Virginia while still being a senator from Florida, which would entertain many attacks. Let's just say that happens and Trump-Rubio is the winning ticket. Well, who's going to make the appointment to replace Rubio? Florida Governor Ron DeSantis. Does Trump trust DeSantis to make the choice that Trump wants? And is Florida, it's definitely a red state, but, could have a competitive special election in the Senate too, potentially risking a Senate seat. The same goes for Ohio. Now, Ohio's just as red, if not redder, than Florida. But the person who would replace J.D. Vance, if the Trump-Vance ticket wins, is Ohio Governor Mike DeWine. Donald Trump's not a fan of Mike DeWine. And in fact, Mike DeWine has made it known that he may even appoint Matt Dolan to the Senate. And Dolan is an anti-Trump candidate. So does Trump really want to swap out one of his best defenders in the Senate for someone who'd be a mini Larry Hogan if Hogan wins from Maryland? This type of calculation, I think, is kind of under the radar, but is also important and probably will be a factor in Trump's decision. Will it be the deciding factor? I don't know. Probably not. But it does say that maybe the Rubio-Vance possibilities come with a little bit more baggage than has already been discussed.
You make an interesting point about Rubio and the residency issue, which for some reason people seem to think isn't that much of an issue, which seems to me to be crazy because, for example, had Ted Cruz, who was born in Canada, or even John McCain, who was born in Mexico, though he was born to a military man serving abroad, had they won the presidency, there would have been litigation as to whether or not whether they were native born, for example, a term that has never had to be defined.
Right. But I mean, that's not the issue with Rubio.
No. But what I'm saying is people are going to
contest it.
You don't want, it will be contested. It will cast a shadow over or whatever. It'll cast something. It'll create controversies during a period in which Trump could be lavishing in the fact that he had restored his presidency and all of that. What does he need that? What does he need that for? I don't know. Now, the only thing that I think that would lead him to pick Rubio is this idea that he is making historic inroads among Latinos and that this would be a way of doubling down on that. Aside from that, Rubio is an impressive political player, and is fleet on his feet, very articulate. I can't even imagine the debate between him and Kamala.
Well, I could,
despite his one bad.
I have to say, I have to name another liability for Rubio, and that's abortion.
Because he is very hard line on abortion.
Both he and Vance have a pretty much the traditionalist Catholic view of life, and that means that they believe that there should be practically no exceptions to abortion restrictions, and that would mean that Kamala would seize on that sole thing. If you just look for all we've talked about for the past 45 minutes, what is the one issue that's working for Democrats? And you mentioned it earlier, John, and that's abortion. That's the one issue. And Trump has found a way to kind of avoid the abortion issue as best he can by saying it's up to the states and by saying he wants exceptions for rape, incest, and life of the mother. Picking a vice presidential candidate who is to Trump's right, let us say, on abortion, will expose the ticket to attacks. And it's not easy. I mean, Paul Ryan, when he was Romney's running mate, Biden attacked him on the abortion issue in the debates in 2012. And I think Biden won those exchanges. So that's another thing with Rubio that you just got to be wary of. Now, why does Trump like him? As you said, he's a very good communicator when, he doesn't get trapped by Chris Christie. And he also is the one potential candidate on that short list of Hispanic heritage. And so Trump, to the degree that the Trump campaign is thinking through an identity lens, you have Rubio there. You also have 3 African-American men, Scott, Donalds, and Carson, which I think is interesting as well, because we know that Trump would really like to have a record number of black men vote for him in November. So there's a lot of different factors at work here, and I think the short list is helpful, but it doesn't get us any closer to kind of winnowing out who the actual nominee will be.
I have two thoughts on the Rubio thing. One is regarding, I had this funny thought when you said, why does Trump really need another legal battle, if he has to deal with this residency thing? And then I'm thinking, well, if he has some sort of pathological attraction
to fights,
inviting these fights, then maybe. But on a I think more realistic note, I still think someone like Rubio, his own brand is too well established. He looms a little too large on the political scene by himself, I think, for Trump's comfort. I think he needs more of a sideman figure than Rubio is.
I want to issue just a quick weird mini defense of Byron Donalds, who has fallen into a controversy in the last couple of days. The congressman from Florida, for saying that the crisis in the black family is so severe that an argument can be made that things were better in the Jim Crow era because black families were still together, and there is a hue and cry, and people are screaming, yelling. And this is an argument that was made by black sociologists in the 1970s and 80s, like William Julius Wilson and Orlando Patterson, who were talking about the complexities of the racial progress that had been made in the United States. William Julius Wilson, maybe the dean of African-American sociologists, who wrote a book called The Declining Significance of Race in 1978. And he wrote that there had been downsides, particularly the atomization of the black family. I don't think Byron Donalds is sitting in his study poring over the work of William Julius Wilson and Orlando Patterson. Nonetheless, we're having one of those 2-minute hates in relation to him that might be exactly the kind of thing that would knock him out of contention. Because again, what do you need that? All you're doing here is, it's first, do no harm when you're talking about picking vice presidential candidates. And you just don't need the conjurer. You want somebody who's just going to go out there and hit the ground running and be an attack dog and all of that. And you don't need somebody who has, issues, Other problem with Ben Carson, of course, is that thing that Trump himself said crazily during the 2015, that Ben Carson had been some kind of a psychopath in his teenage years or something like that. So you can then throw the things that Trump said about Carson and at Trump. And again, what does he need that for? Carson is a remarkable person and has a remarkable biography that people, if they knew it or learned it in 2016, have forgotten, and that could be reintroduced in very powerful ways. This journey to being a an open heart surgeon and a neonatal heart surgeon, which is an unbelievable achievement. But again, so
and that leads us to a certain governor of North Dakota, a man who you have mocked mercilessly on this program.
Mocked him. I have not mocked him. I had never heard of him. I am the one person in New York City who walks around in a Doug Burgum for President hat, because, as I've said many times, whatever you can say about Doug Burgum, his logo was fantastic.
He's from the North. He's got it all. He's got a great story. He's a great governor. Gets along with Trump. He shouldn't be counted out. And then, of course, we're friends with Tom Cotton. He obviously would bring a lot to the ticket with Trump. And, Trump wants somebody who can go out there and defend him and do it in hostile environments. And certainly, I think Cotton has proved that he can do that over the past several months.
Yeah, I got to say this about Tom Cotton, because he was our last roastee. He is a friend of ours. He is a commentary reader since he's 18. Obviously, those personal credentials and his the influence that the ways of thought that our magazine and this publication and people have integrated themselves in his political and policy life would suggest that, were we endorsers, though that might not be helpful to him.
Yeah, I don't want to get him in trouble, John.
Right. However, I just want to say that if in his own characterological terms, the thing about Tom Cotton is that he has a very low center of gravity and a very finely tuned personal thermostat. He does not lose his cool. He is utterly fearless. He will say what he wants to say. He's not afraid of anybody. He risked his life in Helmand province, and, that changes a man. And I'm sure, at any given moment, if he finds himself under the slings and arrows of horrible assaults from all kinds of people, he can just think back to moments when, his life was in mortal danger. And we could talk a little about D-Day in relation to this, and then say, so what? I don't care what Margaret Brennan has to say to me. I don't care if Kristen Welker wants to question what I say about abortion. I'm cool with it. I got other things to do. That is a pretty good personality, though people say that he, isn't the most colorful person. He's actually very dry, very witty, very savvy and literate. But I mean, that personality for Trump, since he's got this choice, right? He can go obsequious, which is what he did or this is sort of the deal that he made with Pence. Pence was the obsequious toady until he could no longer do it, and people started coming after him on January 6th looking to kill him. And so that would be like Tim Scott, the way Tim Scott behaves, or something like that, or maybe Elise Stefanik. Or he can go with somebody like Cotton, who could just give it without any difficulty whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, in a Cotton-Harris debate would not work out well for Vice President Harris. I think that's pretty much a sure bet if you're just trying to do the matchups. And Kamala, for all her weaknesses, which we spend a lot of time discussing, and there are many, and they are real, she performed adequately in that debate with Pence. The fly helped her. When the fly landed on Pence's head.
Oh my God, the fly.
That definitely was some type of symbol.
Yeah.
The Lord of the Flies was somehow suggesting something. I'm not sure what.
Yeah.
But she did. She performed adequately. And I think we can expect her to do the same in this vice presidential debate. But I'm pretty certain that Tom would still win.
Very quickly. So there was a literal standalone story in the New York Times last week that said Tom Cotton is unexpectedly on the short list for vice president. Standalone story by Michael Bender, who had talked to 3 people who did not ask not to be named because of blah, da, 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 da. That story is called A Trial Balloon. That story was placed in the New York Times. And my view is
the 3 people were named Donald, John, and Trump.
Right. That story was placed in the New York Times because of Tom Cotton's connections to people like Commentary Magazine and Dan Senor, whose policy director he would have been on Dan Senor's 2010 senatorial campaign. I'm just saying, I'm not trying to hurt him because this is all going to come up in the packet.
We got to keep up. It's in the packet.
Be in the packet. So all I'm saying is, like, that trial balloon was put out there to see whether there would be MAGA or Trump world response, hostile or negative MAGA and Trump world response, and I didn't really see any.
No, I mean, this is something else that Cotton brings to the ticket if he were chosen, which is he is a bridge between the 2 parts of the party. I hesitate to call them wings because our wing is really an anti-room. Yeah. But the MAGA, there's MAGA, and then there's
it's a mudroom. It's the mudroom.
It's the mudroom that you enter now to get to the MAGA wing. But nonetheless, he joins them in the same house, and and you can't say that for some of the other candidates.
Anyway, so I the whole point here is that this is the only thing that is going to happen. Really, this is the only thing that is going to happen is the choice of vice president. So it's bigger than it might otherwise be, in a funny way, given everything else, including the fact that in 2012, Romney names Paul Ryan, but by the way, neither one of them was particularly well known to the American people. So the Obama campaign was focusing most of its fire on Romney to find Romney down.
Well, Ryan, of course, had been targeted earlier by Obama. Right. In the infamous
2011
where the body double threw grandma off the cliff, right? Because of the high-end budget. So to the degree that Paul was known, it was hostile among liberals and a few independents.
No, exactly. So all I'm saying is, though, that they got nothing to define on Trump. I mean, there's nowhere to go with Trump. So the only X factor in this election is you got Biden, you got Harris. Opinions of them are pretty fixed. You got Trump. Opinions of him are totally fixed. There will be this 4th person who will, of necessity, simply because of the lack of interest in other matters, be the most scrutinized vice presidential pick in history, just because there's nothing else to talk about. So it's a fun thing to speculate about, whereas it used to be not that fun because it was like, So then we're gonna have the whole thing with the whose plane, what's the number on the wing of the plane that took off from a private airport in Fayetteville, and all that. It is notable, by the way, that one of the people who is not on the list, and you can maybe wonder whether the whole thing is a feint and that he's going to go for Katie Britt, who is not on any list, or Sarah Huckabee Sanders, who is not on any list and is the governor of Arkansas, of course, with Tom Cotton as the
no one's worried, who Sarah Sanders would pick if somehow that seat came open.
But my point is that neither of them was on this list, and so you might say the whole list is a trick, a Trumpian trick to because he wants
indeed the only woman is Elise Stefanik.
That's right. Yeah. So anyway. All right, so we have not talked about D-Day, 80th anniversary of D-Day, most remarkable military offensive in history, largest amphibian landing in the history of the world, an astonishing event of world historical significance. And
I think the most moving thing about this 80th anniversary is that the veterans are there, and this may well be the last significant D-Day anniversary. Usually, the big celebrations are every 5 years. This may be the last one where the veterans are present.
Yeah,
and it is just amazing to see. These are
you have to be 98 years old at a minimum to be a veteran of D-Day.
These are 100-year-old men, and they've traveling from America to Normandy, and it's just amazing to see, and the wonderful reception that the French President Macron has given them. And so that's very moving to me. I think it's 80 years. The distance historically between World War II and the current moment is very similar to the distance historically between the American Revolution and the U.S. Civil War. And Lincoln was always making the point that you needed to somehow revive the memory of the fathers because they're gone, but you have to keep alive the ideas that they promulgated and the reasons that they took their stand. And I think we're in a similar place in the United States today. We have to remember what World War II was about and what it cost. And because if we forget that, we are inviting a conflict of a similar scale. And of course, the past 80 years have been spent with America trying to prevent a conflict like World War II from happening again.
So another anniversary this week, an odd anniversary, is the source of my commentary recommends today. In 1967, I believe, the singer Bobby Gentry released her song "Ode to Billie Joe," and the date of the song begins was the 3rd of June, another sleepy, dusty Delta day. So 3rd of June, of course, was Monday, I think. As we know, my days of the week have been screwed up this week, so excuse me. And I was thinking about this because this may be one of the few works created in my lifetime. I was born in 1961 that genuinely rises, though it was a huge hit single, to the level of American folk art. And Bobby Gentry's an interesting character in that respect because, like American folk artists of a certain type or vintage, she really only had 1 or 2 songs after this and then vanished. She vanished. People have spent years trying to find her, dig her up, see what happened to her, why she stopped recording, why she stopped doing things. And that just adds to the mystery that is at the heart of this genuinely great work of American popular art, which of course is a kind of story of rural banality. Girls picking cotton, her brother is baling hay, her mother says, "Come in, it's time to eat, wipe your feet. Oh, I got some news. Billie Joe McAllister jumped off the Tallahatchie Bridge." And the song proceeds to little bits of evidence that our narrator is extraordinarily disturbed by what's happened. You're not eating. Why aren't you eating? Nobody knows what happened to Billie Joe. And the mother says, "Well, I think somebody looked like you on the bridge when he jumped off. Someone said they saw someone looks like you." And then the song takes this final turn into the notion that the community of this town that she was in was somehow kind of destroyed by Billie Joe's suicide. He threw something off the bridge. We never find out what it is that he threw off the bridge. We don't know what happened between them. It is an enduring mystery, but it is something tragic and terrible. There's never been a song like this. There's never been a top 40 number 1 hit like this. It is like a singular piece of American folk art. And that's why go listen to it today. The haunting nature there is nothing before it or since that comes anywhere near to its unique quality. So that's Bobby Gentry's Ode to Billy Joe, 3rd of June, a hot, dusty Delta day. So we'll be back tomorrow. For Abe and Matt, I'm John Podhoretz. Keep the candle burning.